Isabel, you sending your presentation? All right. Before we get to that, everybody, papers. Have your papers out. Make sure your name, your rank, and serial number. Yeah. No, I just, yeah.
But I read it. It's only if I like get straight down, it's like scared, and then I don't know what to say, and I like panic, and then I can't read everything.
Don't get freaked out.
Here, can you please pick it?
No, I'll let you do it.
But it's just, I will put it
Anybody
face
else need
down.
a stapler? Stapler's right here. Everyone else turn theirs in. I printed both your guys's and then threw them away. So you got to. But I printed them and then I threw them away. Yeah, here.
The DBQ we wrote last year.
Sounds good. Yeah, you try me. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's DBQ about the atomic bomb. I know. I feel like we did. I feel like that was like one of our last ones. If we should have dropped it, right? That would have been. The United States
Let's quickly blame each other for this.
was more to intimidate the Soviet Union in the post-Second World War rather than a strict. Yeah, we did write this last year.
That's it?
This
Yeah, you did that.
That was like one of our last ones, right?
Huh? Well, we'll see. We have time. Do I got everyone's paper? What happened will be, okay, for those of you who thought it would be on an track meet during a snowstorm, get it to me before class, not a big deal, but get it to me before. And you got the mouse. You can find me this.
Okay. What's your smiley face?
I don't know. I didn't say it. I don't make them. You're gonna have
Make smiley faces?
no,
Do you ever smile?
never. I've never once smiled.
Wow. Ready? Yeah, I like her. She's kind of a slay. I'm gonna try to go faster. There's a lot of information about her.
Well, I studied for.
You okay? I can just read them my essay.
You have a dance prepared in one?
No. Unfortunately. Did nobody do Luciana? You did?
Yeah. All right, everybody. So, same goes before. I will ask questions about this on the test. So, at about 5 minutes, I will say 5 minutes or something. I think I'll keep it original and say 5 minutes. And then at 6 minutes, I throw this up. That's 7. That's 7. The desk.
The bowling pin. Stephanie St. Clair.
I'm getting old.
Look, she's a little fan.
Oh, still not there?
It's okay, I'll just continue to stand up here. All right, guys, how's your day?
I don't know why.
I rode a horse today. And it
There we
freaked
go.
me
You're
out.
hitting the button.
Okay.
Move them out. Do you want the lights on? It's kind of.
Yeah, just turn them off.
Yeah, I won't turn them off because it's kind of. All right, here we go.
All right. Okay, Stephanie St. Clair. So she was born in the West Indies, supposedly. There's not a lot of information about her early life. So she was born in the West Indies. Her birthday is December 24th, 1897. A bunch of people think she came to Canada with the Caribbean domestic scheme, which is basically they took over like 3,000 workers and made them servants in Canada. So her story kind of starts where she was a servant for about 5 years for a family in Canada, and then eventually ended up in Harlem. So she went to New York, and that's where she kind of does all of her stuff, is in Harlem. So during the Harlem Renaissance, this was like her biggest thing. Harlem was exploding in terms of people moving there. It was a very, it is a very big African American community. And she met this guy named Duke. The dude tried to prostitute her, and she basically got him into a gang fight, and then he died. There's like a reoccurring theme of her killing her husbands and boyfriends. So, but that's besides the point. So she started about, sorry. So she had, her first business was with her boyfriend, Ed. They had controlled drugs around Harlem. She eventually ended up making $30,000. Wanted to leave Ed. Ed was like, I don't want you to leave. And then he was trying to strangle her, and she pushed him so hard that his head hit a table and he died. She didn't go to jail. So then she started getting into what's called the numbers game, which is a very big kind of lottery. When I read about it, it was weird, but think of it as like lottery gambling. That's what that is. So she got really big into that, was making over $20,000 a year, had like 40 people working for her. And she would also do extortion rackets and theft rackets. So she was pretty big deal. Everyone in Harlem called her the Queen of Numbers because she was just constantly, she was just growing. Her business was growing so much, and she was just making so much money off of this. So with the money that she was able to get, she used a lot of it to publish stuff in the newspapers about police corruption. There was this one time where she got arrested for a bunch of trumped up charges, ended up going to a woman's workhouse for 8 months. And when she got out, she sued. Basically, she didn't sue. She did something with the police commission, exploiting all of the police officers that she gave kickbacks to. And then with that, they ended up firing over a dozen police officers. So she was like, if you're going to put me in jail, I'm just going to expose you type thing. So, but she did a lot of putting stuff in the newspapers. If she didn't like you, she'd put your name in the newspaper and basically like hate you, like talk about all these things about you. But she was also very much a social activist for people in Harlem, as well as racial movements and social movements within the 20s. So this guy, which is Dutch Schultz, I don't think anyone did him. Did he? Okay, so he was at the time going into the Great Depression. He was really big when Prohibition was happening, and he made a bunch of money. He was known as New York's like biggest mobster type thing. And he went into Harlem because he saw how much money a bunch of policymakers, especially St. Clair, was making. And he was like, well, I want that. So he would kill Black operators or extort them to try to get their business or get a cut of their business. St. Clair didn't like that. So she ended up was like, I'd rather die than give you anything. So she went into this big, like they would, if anyone was supporting him, she would like tear down their businesses and stuff like that. He ended up putting a contract over on her life and things like that. He eventually died by this guy named Lucky Luciano because Schultz wanted this guy named Thomas Dewey to be assassinated. He was just a big attorney in New York that wanted Schultz gone. His career ended, wanted him in jail, stuff like that. So Schultz wanted to kill him. Lucky Luciano did not want Thomas Dewey to die. And so Lucky Luciano, the commission, basically gunned him down in the restroom of a restaurant. So he died. And St. Clair was like, well, that sucks. I didn't get to kill him type thing. And basically sent him a telegram on his deathbed that said, if I read it correctly, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. So basically like, yeah, she was kind of He's like, I'm getting the last word type of thing. So after this, she gave much of her business to, that is not what that's supposed to say, a bunch of her business to this guy named Bumpy Johnson, who ended up becoming one of the reigning kings in Harlem. She basically gave all of her business to him because she just didn't really want to be in the life anymore. There wasn't a whole lot of explanation why. It was more of she just kind of gave it up and gave it to this guy. And they would, they would end up working with Lucky Luciano and stuff like that. So she then ended up getting married to this guy. His name was Sufi Abdul Hamid, and he was known as the Black Hitler because he was very anti-Semitic, had this very Nazi fashion of socializing movements and things like that. So he ended up having an affair within the first year of their marriage, and immediately as she found out, she shot him 3 times, and she went to jail for attempted murder. So yeah, he didn't die. I don't know why, but yeah, she went to jail for attempted murder. There's some other things that are saying that she didn't actually shoot him, but she still went to jail for assault. But from a bunch of sources I read, she did shoot him, and she got to jail. She went to jail for attempted murder. So after that, she kind of just lived a life of seclusion. She just, nobody really knows where she went. It didn't even tell me where she died type thing. But she ended up meeting back with Bumpy Johnson, and they lived together before he had died, which was the year previous before she died in 1969. And they just talked about how she transitioned from this life of big crime to still being a social activist and still trying to use her money for good and things like that, because that's really what she did. A lot of the money that she made went to racial progress. So her legacy was basically what I just said. She inspired a bunch of businesswomen, and it was the biggest thing in the time for her to be a woman of color as well as have her own business in the 1920s and not be married or anything like that. Like, this was all her own thing that she was doing. So that was pretty cool. And again, her being a social activist while also being a really fancy gangster. So yeah, that's all I have. And Bumpy, yes.
Really good going. She had a few avenues to go, so she took them.
Yeah.
Good job. Any questions? All right, good. I was gonna say one thing about him. Thomas Dewey was the district attorney.
Yes, yes.
And I just talked about him in U.S. history, because he ran for president against Harry Truman.
I'm about to say he won, but then he didn't.
Yeah, but Dewey defeats Truman, yeah. All right, good job. Charlie, you're next. Then you're next. All right. Going into PowerPoint. Either side.
Okay, so am I good to go? No answer.
Okay, I'm ready, go.
Okay. So I did Married to the Mob of like mobsters, wives, girlfriends, mistresses, etc. Is the ones I'm talking about? Here's Exner, Virginia Hill, Maria, Victoria. I don't know how to say that. Now
Which one?
this one.
That has to be Spanish, so that, you're probably gonna talk about it. That's
Hey, now.
Colombian.
All right.
Are you talk about her too, a little bit? Okay,
Oh,
we're good.
okay. Well, there isn't really much to tell about her. So, and then Catherine. So we're gonna start with Judith Exner. She was born January 11, 1934, and died September 24, 1999. She was first married to William Campbell, who was like up and coming actor. They divorced in 59. And she eventually met Frank Sinatra, and they had a little bit of fling for a couple months. And then Frank Sinatra introduced her to JFK. And then JFK introduced her to this mobster named Sam Giancana. And he's known as Chicago's Godfather. So she eventually began her relationship with Kennedy, and she was friends with Giancana too. And she would run like letters in between them for like 18 months. And this is because Giancana allegedly had connections in Cook County, Illinois, where Kennedy really needed to gain like the upper hand there to win the presidency. And so like allegedly there was some like backdoor dealings going on there. And then the FBI began investigating her. And then she was finally subpoenaed in 1975. And she told the Senate everything. And then Giancana was going to be subpoenaed, but he was murdered before he could do that. And that was why she was hesitant to share a story about it. And the Kennedy family still denies that she ever had an affair with Kennedy, but most historians agree that she probably did, just because of how often she was at the White House. This is Virginia Hill. She was born August 1916 and died March 24th, 1966. She was a girlfriend of Bugsy Siegel, but before that, she became a waitress at the mob-run restaurant San Carlo in the Italian Village. And she eventually became friends with Joseph Epstein, and he was like a famous bookmaker, and it's not really clear if they had a romantic relationship at all. But Epstein introduced her to Fischetti, which they did end up having a romantic relationship with. And then Fischetti introduced her to Lucky Luciani, and then, or not Luciano, and then Luciano introduced her to Bugsy, and she had a romantic relationship with the last three of those. And she was a courier for the mob, so she ran like letters and messages between mobsters, and she was known for being really, really good at her job and like blending into the like scene and like playing the dumb chatty girl that no one thought anything of. And Bugsy was actually killed in her home. She was subpoenaed in 1951, and she denied everything. But they eventually indicted her on income tax evasion charges. And then she fled to Europe, where she lived out the rest of her life with her son that she had. And she allegedly committed suicide on sleeping pills, but because she had so much information about the mob, people think that she might have been assassinated, so she couldn't store anything. This is Maria. She was born in 1961. She married Pablo Escobar in 1976 when she was only 15. They met when she was 12. He was 26 when they got married, I think. Maybe older. Very creepy, very weird. She claims that at the beginning of their relationship, Escobar kept his illegal activities secret, and she never really questioned him. Eventually, they had 2 children together, and Pablo Escobar kept several mistresses. He even built like a separate like guest house in their home to keep his other mistresses while his wife was home too. Super, super bad. And she generally disapproved of his work and like, but she stayed with him for like the rest of his life, which is super weird to me. But this is Catherine Kelly. She was born March 18, 1904 and died May 28, 1986. She was a girlfriend of Machine Gun Kelly, or wife of Machine Gun Kelly. She married Lonnie Clyde Fry in 1918. They had 1 child together in 1919. She divorced him, married L.G. Brewer in 1921, and then she divorced him and married Charlie Thorne. And I couldn't figure out what year they were married. I couldn't find information on that. And then she married George Kelly in 1927. She's the one who bought him a machine gun and gave him the nickname George Machine Gun Kelly. And they kidnapped Charles F. Urschel, who was rich somehow. I forget. And they successfully got a ransom for him. And then they were eventually obviously being chased for this. And Catherine tried to get an FBI deal for her and her mother, who helped them carry out this kidnapping, to get a lower sentence if she turned in George. And that they were arrested before that went through, so it didn't. And that's it.
Okay, and there's a lot of you have. You know, it's one thing that ties them all together. No one saw it. Not all of them, but most of them have many different husbands or wives.
Oh,
except for-
yeah.
You know, that's a lot of like looking around, finding, yeah, Machine Gun Kelly, that's a good one. Catherine Kelly. All right, good job. And then you might also notice one thing, isn't Lucky Luciani like in everything? He is in all of these. He goes on, he's in, I would bet half your presentations have something where you mention him or close to him. Even Pablo Escobar. Give me a sec, I will find yours eventually.
All right.
Maybe. He's loading up on that. Exactly.
Alright, so.
So, probably been wondering why you've been hearing about Lucky Luciano everywhere. Time to explain that. Right. All right. Sorry.
Oh, I'm out of the mouse on my side, just one second.
All right. Right. So he was born November 24th, 1897, on in this little mining town in Sicily called La Carafridi. His father was a sulfur miner, and he had 4 different siblings. We don't know much about his time there, but when he was 8 years old, his father saved up enough money to move to the United States, and they ended up in this neighborhood in Brooklyn called the Lower East Side. It's sort of this big immigrant neighborhood. So he actually he he got a job at 14, dropped out of school, and basically just sold hats on street corners he was until he won money in a dice game, and he decided that he wanted to go into crime as a way to make money. So he started out. So he started out as a lower ranked member of the 5 Points gang, and he basically early on he offered a lot what's called protection, where it's just basically you pay money and they don't like the mob doesn't bother you at all. So he just did protection for a while. He rose up through the ranks of the gang, and that's where during this time got the name Lucky, which was due to a lot of this one specific, I believe it was a knife fight that he was in where he got severely injured and he survived from it. And then he also met a lot of other famous gangsters during this time, namely Vito Genovese and Frank Costello. So basically, there there was this one uh, there was this mobster by I believe it was I believe it was Albert Rothschild. He was nicknamed the Brain, and basically at the time Prohibition was coming up and it was about to be enacted, and he saw a really big potential windfall from bootlegging alcohol. So he taught
Rusty, yeah.
Rusty, yeah. So he taught Luciano and all of his associates how to actually run a bootlegging business, and they made a ton of money off of that. So Luciano's making a lot of money there, and he eventually decides to go into the service of this one mob boss named Joe Masseria. So Masseria was about to go into a war with this other mob boss called Salvatore Maranzano over the title of Godfather over the 5 families, which is basically this sort of loose, I guess, uh, this sort of group of different crime families and stuff in New York. So basically, during this war, so Luciano had this idea of something of a national crime syndicate, so that everybody in organized crime could equally benefit from money that they made off from. So he decided during this war, which is called the Castellammarese War, after the family that they were fighting over, Luciano decided to assassinate Masseria and go over to Maranzano's side, just because. So on April 15th, 1931, he killed Masseria at a restaurant with, well, not he invited Masseria to a poker game, and then he went to the bathroom and he brought in gunmen, including Bugsy Siegel was one of the gunmen, wasn't he? And just shot him dead. So after this, that was the end of the Castellammarese War, but Luciano decided that he didn't really like Maranzano that much, so he basically assassinated him too in this event called the Night of the Sicilian Vespers, again with a lot of the previous gunmen that he associated with, and he became he became the leader of the five families through the. So after that, he established what was called the Commission, which is sort of a more concrete. So it's more the it's the so he establishes the commission in order to create a national crime syndicate, and in this process, he puts all the people he worked with on at like leading roles in the organization, and he he abolishes the title of Godfather in the process. Yeah. So during this time, the commission became very powerful, and it actually one of its first tests was actually dealing with Schultz and the fact that he wanted to kill Dewey, which the commission saw that as a threat to their to they saw that as drawing attention to them and basically ruining their operation. So they got Schultz killed for that. So funny thing is, Dewey actually went on to try and prosecute Luciano due to his relation to this prostitution ring. It's sort of unclear that whether or not he was actually related to the ring, but basically they were able to line up a case against him, and because Luciano decided to represent himself in court, he ended up going to prison for a long time. So while he was in prison, he still could kind of run the commission, but after a while he was transferred farther away and he sort of was separated. All right. So in order to actually get out of his sentence, he during World War II, he made this deal with the U.S. Navy to survey harbors outside of New York in this thing called for signs of sabotage and what was called Project Underworld. And after participating in that, and he had to agree to not resist deportation to Italy. So yeah, after World War II, he's deported to Italy. So a few months later, in October, he decides to sort of come back by going to Havana and organizing a meeting of the commission there under the cover of going to see Frank Sinatra. You might see a lot of Frank Sinatra. Yeah, so during this they discussed the various projects that were going on at the time, such as Bugsy Siegel's Flamingo project out in Las Vegas. But the U.S. government found out that he was over there, and so they threatened to embargo Cuba embargo medical supplies from Cuba in order if they didn't get Luciano out of the country. So they did that, obviously. So he lived most the rest of his life in Italy, and he actually died at the Naples International Airport after going to interview with Hollywood. I believe it was a Hollywood director about a movie about his life, which pretty sick way to go, honestly. So at his funeral, there was this other gangster who had taken over the commission at the time called Gambino. Was yeah, yeah. So he gave his eulogy in Italy, and his rest of Luciano's Gamble the family asked that he was asked him to be transferred back to New York so he could be buried in the local graveyard. So he's still in New York today, and you'll see tons of depictions and stuff in a lot of movies about this era and just yeah. So about about the Castellammare's family, it's still technically around today because of Luciano under the name the Genovese crime family, because Vito Genovese took it over after Luciano died. Yeah, he basically
Literally everyone.
yeah he changed the whole course of organized crime in the United States.
What a pathfinder.
Yeah,
And a spy for the war, right?
yeah, he was fought against the Axis.
All right, good job. Chris, you want to go right now? Good job. Luckily, John could survive. You got rolled into this. Oh, I don't have your, where did you send it? Did you send it?
Yep, I shipped it to you.
Oh.
Okay.
Send on Teams or you send an email? Oh. Oh, I got it. You got it. Great. Let's get to Chicago. Give me 1 sec. All right, go.
Right. So, today, I present to you Johnny Torrio, who is a sensei, Chicago's most clever gangster. So, Mr. Torrio was born about like January 20th, 1882, so a little while ago, in a village named, or near a village named, near the village of Naples, which is kind of in Italy. Originally it's called Giovanni, but they changed it to Johnny because I think it should have kept Giovanni, but I guess during his early life, his father died. So they decided, so in his two, they decided to move to America. Changed it to Johnny. That's where they went to New York, Brooklyn. That's where he became the leader of this Gangster gang. Became a bigger deal. Kind of started getting things rolling along. Eventually, he created something somebody might know, named Al Capone. Might have heard of him. But she was able to accrue enough money to just get his own gambling den and getting things set. Getting it all coming together. Then during his time, he was known by a few names, such as the Fox, because like some of the leaders, some of the other police officers said he was quite clever. The way he organized his company, how he presented himself. Also, he's referred to as the brain, or thought he was. I don't know. I thought he was the brain, but I guess I'm not really sure about it anymore after hearing years. I guess because he did like kind of trying to assemble instead of like trying to like battle the gangs all the time. Just going out. My favorite probably has got to be Papa Johnny. You know, because like he was kind of like a later on kind of like a like the papa to like a lot of these leaders coming in a little beforehand. So I guess eventually though we decided to move to Chicago and start some outfit over there. That's where we started doing like the bookmarking. So like like the horse race thing. Started to do some loan sharking, some hijacking. The usual Chicago things. You know how it is. Eventually he created some allies such as Paul Kelly, who was kind of like the person in New York, kind of showed him like how to like show yourself professionally to these people and like how to kind of get started. And later he learned about this guy called Big Jim Colosimo. With a pretty fancy mustache. It's pretty Colosimo, when in Chicago, basically learned about him and kind of became big friends for a while. And that's where he kind of learned about like how to like kind of getting good friends. That's Colosimo was like a big like awesome guy. Eventually things didn't work out for them as Colosimo didn't really want to like go to bootlegging as much and kind of feared that area. So he died under mysterious circumstances, supposedly. And yeah, things didn't start working out. Next one is Gino Bandon. It's a guy right there. Kind of a guy who's kind of a big deal too in Chicago. Kind of got into the whole like opposite of Colosimo where he really wanted to go to bootlegging and kind of really got into it. And yeah, things worked out for a while and then until he didn't. He died under mysterious circumstances. Yeah. And I guess during his time with Colosimo, they had some problems with like some of the Black Hands for like some Serbian. Yeah.
That's from World War I, but that's for the black men in this context. They were Italian,
Oh, okay.
another Italian,
Oh, okay, that's good.
group of Italian.
Yeah, they're like some, the other gangs are like trying to restore policy, so you know, this gang came in, kind of did some things, and then it really, yeah, I changed it. And later on, during one of, during, I think it's one of his brothels, I think two women in the street and tried to telling him, yeah, you know, a couple years. Yeah. Then later, yeah, this is a big one, like this. Yeah, later on, Bannon, yeah, I think his after he died, his crew kind of got suspicious, kind of like putting two and two together. They realized it probably was either Torrio or one of his goons. They decided, so some of his goons, such as Bugs and Ray and Henry West, they decided to come out. They found him after his grocery shopping with his wife. They shot him 4 times. Don't worry, he's fine. And then he was sent to prison for 9 months. So afterwards, after he recovered, and they were able to like put enough dirt into him, and yeah, that wasn't too well. Afterwards, he was kind of shaken by that. Kind of decided to like leave for a while. Not really sure about it. They decided to, yeah, so he decided to retire. He gave his whole operation and whole outfit in Chicago to Mr. Al Capone, kind of give him a big old boost. He decided to move to Italy for a while and kind of start some operations there. Things didn't really work out at the end though, because of yeah, I've heard of him, Mr. Mussolini. Didn't really like gangsters, so he decided to like move back to the West Coast, where he kind of started some more things, kind of became an advisor to Luciano, as aforementioned, and Frank Costello. We're kind of like joined their whole cartel. I became a big leader in that. Eventually, unfortunately, later on, he died from a heart attack in a barber chair. I mean, the 4 bullets didn't get him, but the barber chair though. Yeah. Yeah. I guess as far as legacies go, I think it's a pretty solid legacy. You know? Yeah. Yeah, pretty good legacy. I mean, like really made like Alphone like a big name. Kind of gave him kind of gave over his whole outfit so he could actually really grow into the position. You know, he helped with the whole cartel, and yeah, became a pretty well-known figure.
What was this group in Chicago called again?
They were called the James Town Gang or something like that. James. Yeah.
And then the outfit too.
Yeah, and he also became like during that time he also kind of unified the 5-point gangs and kind of like allied them to the James. Yeah.
The Peacemaker, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Peacemaker at first for a while. Not first.
Yeah, he was a good character and he seemed to be on the side. All right, good job. Any questions? Anything? All right. Tom, were you today? Were you today? Here we go. Maybe. Come on, went all the way back to the beginning. Can you believe it?
I'm.
Well, that's since we were rocking Johnny Torrio, it makes perfect sense. for
Yeah,
sure. Like,
right?
along. All right.
Perfect. All right. Box for him.
I think the mountain bike's on my side. Wait.
Okay, so he was born to French and Canadian parents. He was not Italian American, which was a huge letdown, but it's okay. He attended a private Catholic school, which was called Stratton High School, which I think is the funniest thing because like he turned out to be a huge gangster, which is awesome. He is very Catholic, which comes in later on. He married Lucille Logan, who like left him because of crime, and then he later married Evelyn Harrell, who they stayed married, and there's actually no documented pictures of her, which is another just fun fact. So, okay. So his beginning in crime, he joined a juvenile gang at 18. He was sent to prison 3 times before he turned 21. And then he moved to Chicago. He started out, he was found by robbing a warehouse. He was involved in a horse stealing ring, which I'm not 100% sure why, like what the point of that was, but he stole horses, I guess, for like horse racing and stuff. But and then he took part in a robbery involving the death of a police officer. Some major crimes was, bootlegging, robbery, and conspiracy to counterfeit checks and cash it in. And it was $62,000 in American Express checks. This was mainly after he retired, quotes. All right, so beginning in gang activity. He joined O'Banion's gang, and him and Jaime Weiss kind of like backed O'Banion, and yeah. And then this was during Prohibition, so, bootlegging and stuff. All right, so this is a huge gang war situation. So the start of the gang war is Johnny Torrio, and I've seen it spelled both like that and then Dean. So I'll just say Dean, O'Banion. And basically what happened was allegedly Johnny Torrio was basically arranged for O'Banion to be shot in his flower shop, and then he died. And then there was major revenge for O'Banion, and basically that was the beginning of the gang war. And then after O'Banion died, Jaime Weiss became like the boss, and he was backed by Vincent Drucci and Moran. So after that, Torrio was shot 4 times, survived, gave it to Al Capone, and then Jaime Weiss was killed in revenge for Torrio. And then because Jaime was killed, there was revenge again for Jaime dying. Lots of revenge, lots of killing. And then at the beginning, the North Side Gang, which is the gang that they were part of, they were pretty small and weren't super huge in bootlegging, but then they started to rise up, and then the Chicago outfit, or the James Street Gang, they were now seen as kind of like bootlegging rivals. All right, and then that leads to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So this was I'm going to call it the South Side Gang because like North Side, South Side. South Side's gang's attempted assassination on Moran. This was basically, there was a whiskey truck full of like really expensive whiskey that Moran's gang bought, and they were going to this warehouse to, get the whiskey. Moran didn't show up because he saw a cop car and thought it was a cop car and thought it was a raid. So he ended up just kind of like going around the corner. Didn't show up. Basically, Al Capone was in Florida at the time. So it's assumed, no one really knows. I assume most of you know this because there was I'm going to talk about it if you don't know what it is. Basically, Al Capone was out in Florida at the time.
No one really knows. No one really knows what happens, but it was pretty obvious that it was Al Capone that kind of that orchestrated it. 6 people died and 1 was near death. The guy who almost died, but he ended up dying because of his injuries, Frank Gusenberg, who was like super influential in the North Side Gang, was like refused to say what happened because of, you know, gang code and stuff like that. People thought it might have been the Chicago police that did it because the gang members that from Capone's gang ended up dressing up in a Chicago police uniform, I guess. And so everyone was like, oh, we saw the Chicago police go in there. It might have been the Chicago police. That ended up being disproved, but it's kind of a conspiracy now. So after Prohibition, he kind of went down in power after all of the after the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Kind of went down in power, went back to petty crime, lots of mail fraud and robbery. On July 6th, 1946, he was arrested for robbery. He was 10 years in prison, out on parole, and then he was rearrested for another crime. Okay, so this was in Dayton, Ohio, I should say that, because he left Chicago, went to Ohio. He was arrested for robbery in Dayton, Ohio, and then ended up being rearrested for a bank robbery in another city that I can't remember the name of. But he was sentenced to another 10 years in prison, and then he died of lung cancer a few months into his 10-year sentence. And yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't, so he's kind of everywhere too.
He was never really like a boss of anything, but he was just super influential, had a lot of stuff.
How do you get the name Bugs?
I actually couldn't find anything about him.
You had a terrible temper.
Yeah.
All right, good job. Who's going tomorrow? Ray, I'm sorry if I get here, but 6 tomorrow, raise your hand. Raise your hand tomorrow. Okay, we'll start right at the bell. Hopefully program team not get up started faster. And for those of you, that track meet or whatever, you gotta get before class. Good job today. Really good presentation. These are fun. It is pretty amazing how many are connected.
Well, my sister's been wanting like a yard dog or pretty little house dog. They are. That's the only reason. Oh, it's so cute.
Goodbye. Good luck. Mention my name, you'll get a good seat. Thank you. What time you got here, Paul? What time you got here? My pen, what did I do with my pen? So tired of retro.
I'm gonna convince my sergeant to let me go to school tomorrow, so I don't have to go to drill in Butte at 6 a.m. So I'm definitely gonna try to convince him to let me go to school, and then just go on Saturday morning.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
and you don't want to miss school.
I'm pretty sure they'll understand because I'm so understand.
See ya.
Yeah, see ya. Open mind.